Now you have to remember, not every article is published for UPSC reasons. At the same time, it's our responsibility to filter certain articles. Okay. Uh, there are there is lot of confusion on which articles is important, which article is not important. But as I told you, previous year questions, either of prelims or mains, is the ultimate guiding light which will help you understand what are the important articles. If you see certain websites or certain mentors, they will suggest Hurriyat may face Unlawful Activities Prevention Act case. Technically speaking, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act is very, very important for your GS paper 3 internal security and GS paper 2 governance. But we need not follow in depth right now, right? So that is what I told you. This is what we call as slow burn article. That means it will take a good amount of time for it to develop. So just reading the headline, okay, Hurriyat may face UAPA. Okay, what is UAPA? As of now, you have zero clue. But just knowing it's related to internal security. So the name itself says unlawful activities. That means things which are not correct. Now, while we are at it, we will learn one more term, that is morality. What is morality? All of you know meanings, right? Morality. What is morality?
Death rate, I think.
Sorry?
Death rate.
That is mortality.
Mortality. Okay, sir.
Yeah, sorry. This is morality. That is mortality. Mortality rate means death rate. This is morality. Morals. We heard the term morals, ethics, right? Ethical moral stories. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine.
It is a distinction between right and wrong or good or bad behavior.
Okay, very good. So simply put, it's good or bad. Morality is good. If you do something good, it's good morals. If you do something, it's bad. Yes. Now, morality is in simplest terms good or bad. If I do something, yes, if I do something, it must be either good or it must be bad. This is like seeing everything in black and white. But in reality, what will happen? There is always a gray area. There is an area in between good and bad. Most of the humanity thrives and survives in this gray area. Why? We will apply good things when it suits us. We will apply bad, or we will say it's bad when it does not suit us. Right? You understand, right? It's a very simple concept. You do it in your day-to-day life. For example, your father is saying something, I will give you 500 rupees. I will give your brother 200 rupees. You are more than happy. Yeah, fine. All is good. No gender justice and all those things. But when if it opposite is true, we will talk about gender justice. Again, it's a very simple layman example. Don't take it personally. I just wanted to drive home the point, morality. Now, why this is important is, in today's editorials and in multiple places, we will use this concept called as morality. Next, if I add the term society, that means if society thinks something is good, then it is good. If society thinks something is bad, that is bad. Societal morality. So the term becomes societal morality. That means in Indian society, sometimes, or in some places, or in some religions, alcoholism is considered as socially immoral act. That means if you drink alcohol, you are looked down. Yes or no? That looked down behavior comes from where? Society. Society is telling us drinking alcohol is bad. So societal morality. Okay. Now, if we remove society and if we add something called as constitution, that is constitutional morality. So what is constitutional morality? As you rightly understand, if constitution says something is good, it is good. But if constitution says something is bad, it is bad. That is constitutional morality. Okay. So morality is a concept which will change from person to person, institution to institution, society to society. In some societies, drinking is not looked down upon. They don't take it. I mean, they don't even look at it. Okay, fine, you are drinking, it's fine. Okay, but in some societies, if drinking is considered as bad, so individual to individual, society to society, institution to institution, things will change. Good or bad will keep on changing. That is why there is a very famous quote, right? One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Okay, because we are looking at the same issue from two opposite sides. Now, Indian government has we will continue the morality discussion in a while, but we'll first look at the front page. Afghan 6 Hindus among airlifted from Kabul. Now, this is a very important step taken by Government of India, which will improve not only our soft power, but will also showcase our humanitarian values. India always stands ahead or stands in front to promote human rights values. So we have evacuated even an Afghanistan parliamentarian. Now, long run wise, right? Now, long run wise, we won't, we don't use any of this data anywhere. But the thing is, as I have told you, this is soft power. When someone points a finger at India and says, what was happening, or what were you doing when Afghanistan was going through crisis? You can say, I always stood by human rights values. I took care of the people. Okay, as simple as that. Now, there is something called as National Register of Citizens. Okay, Citizenship Amendment Act. These are polity concepts in depth. We will discuss them later on. But here, one thing you don't notice is a lot of Muslims. We are not providing asylum to Muslims because it has a lot of logistical nightmares, not religious issues. Okay, it has logistical nightmares. That means if I bring a group of people, okay, if I bring a group of people, some of them might be radicalized. Okay, they might possess internal security threat. Right? I'm not saying everyone is bad. What I'm trying to tell you is some of them might be influenced, radicalized. It will create internal security threat. This is the same reason we are citing for Myanmar Rohingya refugees as well. Okay, so that is a government's stand as of now, but we will discuss that more when CAA bill discussion will come into the forefront. Constitutional morality. The first and most important thing you will notice in this particular article, if you have completed the previous question papers or if you have seen the prelims papers, is this Article 142. What is Article 142? What do you mean by the term complete justice? Okay, so we will explore that a bit more. Then we will try to understand this particular article. First of all, I am sure most of you don't even know the term collegium. Collegium means Chief Justice of India plus 4 senior most judges of the country coming together and deciding who should be appointed as the judge to the High Court or Supreme Court. Okay, that means judges are appointing judges, right? The original constitution dimension had a different understanding, that is both executive, that is the parliament, prime minister and others, plus Chief Justice of India will come together. They will discuss on appointing who should be appointed as the judge to the Supreme Court of India. But right now what is happening, most of the work is done by collegium. So collegium is an institution. It's an informal institution created by judicial innovation. These are all technical terms you have to remember for your UPSC. Judicial innovation. That means judiciary has created its own innovation. What is that innovation doing? It will appoint 4 senior most judges plus Chief Justice of India to select fellow brother judges or sister judges. Now, the problem here is who protects the fundamental rights? Supreme Court of India. Whenever your fundamental rights are violated, Supreme Court of India will come and say, okay, your fundamental rights are violated, I will protect you. Right? But one important thing is right to information or how democracy works is my fundamental right. Yes, or how institution works or how institutions work is my fundamental right. But I actually don't know how collegium system works in India. Nobody knows. It's like a dark mirror. Once you look under it, you cannot see anything beyond a point. You have to assume collegium is working in the best interest of this particular nation. But in reality, Supreme Court being the most important institution in the entire country of all the institutions, it is not transparent. We can appreciate, celebrate, and be happy that collegium is working fast in a diverse fashion, but the functioning of collegium is boiled down to one person. If you read Mr. PDT Acharya's article again and again, he will take one name, that is Chief Justice of India, CV Ramana. NV Ramana, right? Mr. Ramana. So NV Ramana multiple times. He thanks Mr. Ramana multiple times for making things work. My question is this: in the place of Mr. Ramana, if somebody else is there who is not so proactive, I'm just saying hypothetically, do you think collegium would have worked so efficiently? So we cannot hold the institution at the ransom of one individual. If a good individual is there, system will work fine. If individual is not interested, it will not work fine. That is not how institutions are supposed to be there, right? No matter, I will tell you a simple example. All of you must remember your school days. There is a peon. There are multiple peons in the school. One is a very efficient peon. Then there might be one very lazy peon. Okay, just because he is a lazy peon, school does not start when he rings the bell, right? School will start irrespective of whether he rings the bell or not at 9 p.m. That is institutionalization. So in spite of Mr. Ramana or someone else, judiciary is supposed to take or send list to the government, and government should be accepting that list very, very quickly. Now, I'm not criticizing either Ramana or the institution. What I'm trying to tell you is, we as a country don't know how the the judges to the Supreme Court are being appointed. You will learn three cases, that is first judge's case, second judge's case, and third judge's case in your polity classes. I'm sure you will understand in depth. But remember, institutions should work irrespective of individuals heading them. Next, complete justice. Complete justice is a very, very vague term. Okay, if there is no law, if Supreme Court decides to provide justice to you, that is complete justice. Complete justice is a very subjective term. All of you agree at that much, right? You can never say, I will complete my preparation and give UPSC exam. Even after becoming IAS officer also, you still will have a lot of things to learn. Okay, so there is no bar, there is no completeness in a lot of things. So completeness is a subjective term. Next, now boiling down the useful things in this particular article, we can learn three things. While Mr. Ramana is interested in reforming the judiciary, okay, Prime Minister Modi is also very interested in improving the technology in judiciary. Both of them should work together and pass a bill called as National Judicial Accountability Bill, NJAC. Okay, see, that is what I told you, right? Read between the lines. This entire article is telling one thing, Sir is saying one thing, but what I'm telling you is that is fine-tuned for your UPSC. There is a bill called as National Judicial Accountability Bill, NJAC. Okay, what does that bill does? That bill opens up or make the collegium transparent. Right? Then someone cannot criticize judiciary telling how a judge is appointed. Everybody will know that the judge is appointed under a bill which is passed by Parliament of India, which is the most apex body for appointing judges. Are we clear on this? I hope you are understanding the story so far.
Yes, sir.
What happened? Okay, fine. Next. So again, it's like, UPSC aspirants keep conducting their own exam and declaring themselves, I have cleared prelims, I'm eligible for IAS officer. It's a very simple example, but that should not be the case. Judges should not be appointing their own judges. There should be a parliamentary functioning. But the problem is politicization of judiciary. Again, remember the term, very important. See, whenever you use the term ization, that means you are attaching that particular thing to something else. Criminalization of politics, politicization of police, criminalization of or politicization of judiciary. That means if, let's say, a politician appoints me as a judge, okay, he might ask me favors, right? You can cite separation of powers and all those things, but in reality, politicization of judiciary means judges will give judgments in favor to some politicians so that after retirement they will get better jobs, like being appointed as governor of some state. Okay, this has actually happened in this particular country. So we should be very careful in saying why this judiciary came with collegium system. Collegium system is created to keep the politicians out of the appointment process, to keep the political pressures. Okay, clear? Again, I am not taking any specific names because I want you to adapt to that language where you use generic terms. You tell the message without telling the names. So I did succeeded, right? So that is how you write a good UPSC answer. Good. Next, one more term. Diplomacy in the answers. Yes, you have to stab, but there should not be any bloodshed. Okay, next point number 2, diversity within the judiciary. We can easily understand that much. That is self-explanatory in this particular article. So any more questions on this particular article? Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
am I audible?
Yes, please.
Sir, but the author is saying that the appointments have been done in a most transparent manner in the article. Then again, you're recommending NJAC bill.
Bill.
So,
Where is the contradiction? Okay, so actually, one thing I totally understand where like the place you are in. It's a black box. Okay. There are statements which are made by Chief Justice of India, earlier Chief Justices also. I will tell you an example. When Ranjan Gogoi was Chief Justice of India, okay, there was a Chief Justice of High Court, Madras High Court, right? She gave a progressive judgment which is against a particular political party. Let's call that political party as B. Okay. B political party has been criticized, or a judgment is given against that particular party, right? Then she was transferred to Meghalaya or some northeastern state. She resigned instead of going there. Why? She was a very senior Chief Justice. I mean, she was a very senior judge. She was Chief Justice of Madras High Court. She thought like Meghalaya is like a punishment posting. Okay. Then everybody complained, we don't know how this black box works. Then the Chief Justice of India, Mr. Gogoi at that time said, I will give you transcripts on how things work. Okay, but he does not give a reason why she is transferred. Okay, so you can bring in some light on how things work, but that is my right, not your mercy. Right? So we all deserve to know why she was transferred. Okay, so in that sense, whenever the collegium is working in a very transparent manner, we are assuming it's in a transparent manner. Okay, we actually don't know. There is a difference between these two terms, right? Assuming, yes, the black box is now transparent, it has opened up. Earlier it was totally closed, now it's open 5%. So we are celebrating this 5%. But think about 100 years down the line, we need to have National Judiciary Accountability Bill where the judiciary will come forefront. We will discuss the performance of judiciary. Again, before Ramana, we had 2 Chief Justices of India who were subjected to a lot of ridiculousness, who were criticized because they are totally biased towards certain political parties. They also came from collegium system. So we cannot leave judiciary to the mercy of individuals. That is the summary. I hope that answers my question, right, Sumant? Good Chief Justice of India, no bias. Bad Chief Justice, bias. That is not how some things are supposed to work. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Got it, sir.
Yeah. So again, you have a lot of learning, right? Don't worry if you don't understand most of the terms, but remember the term collegium, first judge's case, second judge's case. And if you are really curious, I will recommend you a book. It's a very good bedtime read. 10 Judgments That Changed India by Zoya Modi. Not related to Prime Minister in any way. So I think her name is Zoya Modi. You can Google it. It's a green color covered book. Okay. So it's a bedtime read. I mean, that means you can learn a lot about India, how judiciary came to this collegium system, first judgment, second judgment, third judge's case, Menaka Gandhi case. A lot of knowledge will increase. Okay. And whatever we have discussed today will make 10 times more sense. Okay. Okay. Pursuing post-poll truth. So I hope all of you have read this particular article. What are the key terms you have noticed in this particular article? Haven't read? NHCR, National Human Rights Commission. Very good. State Human Rights Commission, CBI. Okay. Post-poll violence. Good. This is the first and most important term we need to understand. Okay. Rule of law. Why this rule of law? What is rule of law? You must have heard it 100 times. What is rule of law? Again, please remember, this is an evergreen topic. Rule of law is evergreen topic. Please focus very carefully. X is a Indian. As all of you can see, X is a Indian. Okay. Indian laws are always above X. Indian laws are like cloud. It's very simple, right, to remember. Indian laws are like cloud. They're always above us. Okay, so don't tell me, sir, I will take aeroplane, I will fly above the clouds. So that's not what is the example supposed to mean. So Indian laws are above X, and X is supposed to follow them, respect them. When you don't follow or respect a law, what will happen? Why will have a question in mind? Why can't I do what X is doing? That means there is a red light. X did not stop, X went. Okay, but why, being a normal Indian, normal human being, he has stopped at the red light? So what is difference between X and me? That is the first question, right? Because He is the brother-in-law of MLA. He is a son of MP. So when you do all these ridiculous things, okay, people will stop believing in the red light. If you don't implement small laws, big laws will never be respected. Yadha Raja Tada Praja. That means if you take a 50 rupee bribe for a constable, you assume Prime Minister of India is also corrupt, and vice versa is true. If Prime Minister of India is in the, let's say, 2G scam or 3G scam, why can't a traffic constable take a 50 rupee bribe? What is the harm? That means entire society will stop believing in rules and regulations, and the jungle rule or Matsya Nyaya will come into the picture. What is Matsya Nyaya?
No, sir.
Matsya means fish, right? Big fish will eat the small fish. Small fish will eat the even smaller fish. That means it will become a jungle rule. Only the powerful and people with connections will get things done in this particular country. Rest all of us will feel like we are in a democracy, but there is actually no democracy. You're getting the simple concept, right? Like why rule of law is very, very important, because it is 365 days, 24/7, always applicable to each and everyone, but we never think in that particular fashion. Now, why this rule of law is important? Let's say the most famous case being Salman Khan case or any celebrity case. That means when someone is popular or a celebrity, he can do any crime and get away with it. But if someone pickpockets for 200 rupees, he will be in the jail because he does not know anyone powerful. That is not how rule of law is supposed to work. Each and every individual in this country have been given all the fundamental rights. X can be anyone. Okay. But he will have all the fundamental rights. He has right to life. Even if he's sleeping on footpath, he does not deserve to die because a rich person has drunk and he's riding on the street roads. Life with dignity. I may be poor, but I still have dignity. Okay, so that is why rule of law is important. Once you are born in India, you have all these things. Universal human rights are also there, but if you are born in Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, and all those countries, you are not so lucky. Lottery of life is a very challenging thing. But once you are born in India, you are assured of all these rights by the Constitution of India. But what happens? Let's say again, X belongs to a particular political party, right? So that's a right to freedom of expression, right to association, right to thought. I will think left thought or right thought or whatever thought, but that does not give you the right to kill me. Just because I believe a different thought than you, just because I wear a different dress than you, just because I eat something different than you, does not give you the right to kill me. Yes, that is what the fundamental rights are guaranteeing me. I can do whatever I want to do. But the least followed rule in this country is rule of law. Okay, the cornerstone, the most bedrock, the first founding block of entire constitution is individual. You, X is you. All of you are understanding the point, right? X is you. Each and every individual in this 1.4 billion country is X. You have all the fundamental rights. When your fundamental right is violated, fundamental rights of all is also violated. Because why? If X belonging to, let's say, a particular political party is killed, tomorrow the same thing can happen to you also, right? Just because you belong to a different political party. That means it's a chilling effect. Chilling means a fear in the spine. You all have chilling effect, right? Just before the results, when the results are announced, you'll have some variety feeling in your tummy, or you're scared, that kind of chilling feeling. So if you are feeling that fear 24/7 just because you joined a political party or you belong to a different religion or you believe in a different god. Okay, that is not rule of law. Everybody have the power to be equal. Rule of law means that law will treat X, Y, Z, A, B, C equally. All are equal in the eyes of law. Nobody is above, nobody is below. But in reality, what happens? That means depending on who you are, okay, rule of law may apply to you, may not apply to you. If you are an MP, you might commit a crime. Okay, it's fine. If you are poor, illiterate person, you might have a different rule of law. Okay. Again, please remember, this is not limited to this article. I'm not telling you all these things keeping only this article in mind. I'm telling you different concepts. For example, rule of law, equality before law, criminalization of politics, under trials, majority minority issue. There are many topics that will be covered just by this particular example, rule of law. Is this how rule of law is supposed to be, or like this? This is A, this is B. A is the right version, B is the reality version. Clear? Now that article is self-explanatory, and we will discuss one more topic for understanding sake. But how is this different from due process of law? Okay. Due process of law is whether you are following all the steps mentioned in the rule book. Have you filed FIR? Have you submitted someone to the court, high court or just judge, some other court? Did you give them bail? So there is a process, step by step, right? A, B, C, D. Are you following those steps to come to a conclusion? First of all, registering FIR itself is a big deal, right? Okay, so what was I telling? Yes. Now, next most important people are the story hero in this particular editorial or in the long-term UPSC is this police officers. You have seen movies, right? Police officers, IPS, very powerful person, doing anything he want, arrest people. You might be inspired to join IPS because of seeing such movies. Anyone? Yeah, Singham movies. Singham 1, 2, 3. No? Darshana, Singham. Okay, all of you are inspired, right? In reality, what happens is at state level, politicization of police is complete. That means if you are an SI, CA, constable, you are 100% working for whatever the state government is telling you. Okay, at national level, at union level, if you are CBI, okay, you are totally working for the union government. Again, I am not saying these things, so don't think this is Kalyan sir's opinion. These are the opinions of Supreme Court of India, nobody less. Supreme Court of India itself has called CBI as caged parrot. What do parrot do? Parrots will mimic, repeat whatever the owner says, right? Okay, so Supreme Court of India has called CBI as caged parrot. That means you are nothing but a puppet in the hands of the union government. The same applies to state level. Yes, it can be influenced to a maximum level, not just influence. The same applies to the police at the state level. Each and every state controls almost 100% of the police officers because their transfers, their promotion, everything is in the hands of the politicians. So that is why, say again, please don't misunderstand that police officers anywhere in this scenario are inefficient. No, it is not the High Court. It's Supreme Court of India. Okay. It has been repeated multiple times. Caged parrot argument. So coming back to the argument, remember, police in India are very efficient. Okay, there is no doubt that police are efficient in this country. The only thing is whether you are allowing them or not. You might see cases like CBI is dealing a particular case for 20 years, 5 years, 10 years. Okay, this is not inefficiency of the CBI officers. They know who is a culprit. They also know where the proofs are. The only thing is they need blessings from state government or central level. Okay, you can see these themes running in the newspapers, right? Just before elections, opposite party MPs or MLAs will be arrested by the state or union level. Why? I can misuse and abuse the police officers. So if you want Indian police officers to follow rule of law or implement law and order and justice, politicization of police, that means the influence of politicians on the police officers should be reduced to the maximum extent. It's an insult to all the police officers in the country to be misused like this. Yes or no? If you read this particular article, it also says state versus CBI. State officers are not even filing FIR. Just see that the ridiculousness. FIR is the most basic right of any individual. If I go to a police station saying I have lost something, an FIR has to be registered. Even for that, we have to give bribe. Or at all these political cases, they won't even file cases. State police officers, union officers, everybody is efficient. The only thing is they are controlled at different levels. So the fight of union and state are fought in this particular battle. So that is why this country needs police reforms. Are we clear? See, again, I'm not going into BJP versus Trinamool Congress. What I'm going into is long-term solutions, because for a UPSC aspirant, long-term solutions are always important. So when a police officer is having 100% freedom to do whatever he wants to do, okay, then he will protect X. X will be protected. Rule of law will be implemented. Why? It does not matter whether you belong to Trinamool Congress or BJP or Congress or MIM or some other party. X is under the protection of police officers. They will take care of the things. As long as there are orders from higher authorities. Okay, if he's a BJP member, if people are beating a BJP member, don't interfere. Then how will police perform freely? The same applies to opposite. If somebody is beating Trinamool Congress member, if police are told don't involve or don't interfere, then how can X be protected? At the end of the day, X, whether he's a member of Trinamool Congress, BJP, Congress or MIM, he's still Indian, right? He has fundamental rights. I hope all of you are following what I'm trying to tell you. The long-term issue. Yes, okay. See, one time, these are all one-time things. That means next time when we see police officers again, I don't have to repeat police officers, right? Police officers are supposed to be free. They should not be under political influence. Once in a lifetime. Remember this. Communalization of police have happened. That is, Justice Sachar Committee has mentioned that particular aspect, and even in 2002 Godhra riots, some committee reports have suggested that communalization of police officers is true, but we will discuss all that some other time when we discuss police reforms. Okay, so the term is communalization of police. Okay, fine. Now in this particular editorial, just remember, genome sequencing is a very, very powerful tool. What can we learn from this particular article? Genome sequencing. So what is genome sequencing? It's a way to identify which type of COVID virus or coronavirus is spreading in the country, how rapidly is it spreading, and what do we do with such kind of information. For example, in 2021 February, I guess, when the world is going through, or India is going through second wave, Britain has stopped all the flights from India. Okay. England, Britain has stopped all the flights from India. Okay, identifying it through genome sequencing. That means it was testing its citizens. Okay, and the variant Delta was found in Britain, especially in London, I think. Okay, and they found it is very virulent. That means it has a power to spread more easily. Okay, just based on this data, they stopped all the flights from India. That is called as data-driven policy making. That means if you keep following the virus, okay, it will tell you, I have spread to Europe, I have spread to New Zealand, I have spread to Australia. So all the scientists in the world are coming together and they are genome sequencing. That means they are identifying where the virus is traveling to, where the virus is settling, because you can perfectly identify whether the Delta variant has reached A country, B country, C country or not. Okay, because of this, what will happen? No country can blame that, virus has spread from you unnecessarily. That means if somebody says Delta variant B, let's say hypothetically there is a B Delta variant. The B Delta variant came to Australia or Europe from India. Then where is the proof? This genome sequencing have proved that yes, that virus has come to Europe only from India. That is the power of genome sequencing. India is also doing the genome sequencing. What is the advantage? We came to know that Maharashtra and Kerala are spreading a lot of this particular virus. So if we have to impose some stringent lockdowns or something like that, all the neighboring states of Maharashtra and Kerala can lock them up. Right? While you can keep the doors elsewhere open, you can take serious measures about these two countries. In that way, genome sequencing helps a lot. So science and tech topic, it's a 5 minutes YouTube video. All you have to do, no PhD needed, just basic understanding of what is genome sequencing. And India has created this own version called as India SARS Genomic Consortium. Clear? Next, why we have to do genome sequencing? Why have to be very careful about these viruses? Because there is always a possibility of mutation. What is mutation?
A sudden change occurs.
Okay, fine. Yes, many engineering students are there, I understood. So simply, for layman's sake, for those who don't even know the term mutation, I hope most of you know it. As of now, Covishield or Pfizer, all these vaccines are able to stop this Delta variant. Okay, let's imagine worst case scenario. We have roamed so much that we have a Delta plus or Delta XYZ virus. This is a mutation. None of these vaccines are capable to stop Delta XYZ. Okay, that is like again day zero for the coronavirus. Right now we are roaming in the streets because we are vaccinated. We have some immunity from the virus. Remember the March 2020 first lockdown? Stringent, most strict lockdown. If this Delta XYZ virus came out because of mutations where none of these vaccines will work, we have to go back to the first kind of lockdown, the most stringent one. And again, we have to invest in the billions of dollars in the vaccine development. So to avoid such worst case scenario, we need to do genome sequencing. The more data we have, the better we can fight the virus. Clear? Okay. Now, this is a very important article for long-term sake, GS paper 2 governance. Think about it. If you are the Prime Minister of India, you have to even worry about how many people are dying because of excess cholesterol. Why? People will blame you. Your health policy is not there. non-communicable diseases. Simple means communicable diseases. Diseases that spread from person A to person B is communicable. Non-communicable, that means you have cholesterol, you have diabetes, you have hypertension. None of these diseases you can transfer to some other person, right? Okay, but seriously asking, how can you make someone healthy, or how can you take care of the non-communicable diseases? In this article, the entire focus is on the outside, right? Yes, this article is always focused on the outside. That is, government should bring a paradigm change. That is the exact line he uses. Yes. So when you are focusing on outside, how do you reduce all these diseases? Any ideas?
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Some of the recommendations that have been put forward are
Mhm,
usually there is this National Program for Prevention and Control of Cancer,
mhm,
diabetes, and all
mhm,
under National Health Mission.
mhm.
So that is one program that had to be highlighted, and then something on campaigns on promoting healthy lifestyle and physical activity and mental health, as well as strengthening primary health care system
Okay.
in terms of diagnosing NCDs in early of their stage itself,
Very good.
because they are very rampant, they're very
Mhm,
common,
mhm,
and it also mentions that data that in worldwide 71% people die with NCDs.
mhm.
In India, I think we should have, the proper data is much more needed. But
Okay.
in India also, there is high mortality rate with respect to NCDs.
Okay.
So
These are the major suggestions.
yeah.
Okay, fine. So my question was, how do you reduce these diseases? How do you promote health in this particular country when we have non-communicable diseases? Okay, so first and most important thing we need to understand or we need to remember is we do have empirical data, that is a National Family Healthcare Survey, okay, and occasional surveys done by the government. Now, there are multiple ways to look at this particular issue. First of all, we need to go back to our Indian ethos. We never had this lifestyles. Indians always had this active lifestyle. We had yoga, right? Surya Namaskar, meditation. All these things are included in our part and parcel of our life. Okay, when these things changed in the name of the modern lifestyle because of software jobs or other post jobs, okay, we ignore all these things. So going back to our Indian ethos will reduce non-communicable diseases. So that is why world is going crazy about yoga and all these things, right? Next is self-care. First of all, you should be having that idea or awareness that I should be healthy. We cannot put all the burden on the government all the time. Government can only do so much unless there is active participation from the citizenry, right? Things cannot be done. Let's say I want to be active tomorrow. I need to have some information. That is where government hospitals or other places, especially the primary healthcare centers, should have that mechanisms which should inform that either you are in, you are about to have some diabetic stage or your hypertension is increasing or something like that, where people will have counselors, yes, nutritional suggestions. There are a lot of things that government can do at the primary healthcare center. So self-awareness, that is communication through mass empowerment. If you remember, Prime Minister of India has suggested something called as plogging. What is plogging? When you go to the morning walk, you pick up dust or waste along the way and throw it in the garbage. So that is plogging. So it's both keeping you fit and Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Both are happening at the same time. You are being healthy. You are also keeping the environment very healthy. Yes. So plogging, all these things are also happening. Right. So the communication model here is more about societal awareness. See, when we have to deal with non-communicable diseases, it has to be a mass movement, right? We have to bring that societal morality into the concept. Why? Society has to say, if you are fat or if you are obese, if you are not living a healthy lifestyle, it's not good. Society is more than happy to encourage all this. See, there are genetic diabetes or genetic obesity, that is fine, but most of us are gaining non-communicable diseases. That is because society does not put us any pressure. There is no there is no pressure or peer pressure from the society. Only when such things can happen, this self-care concept or going back to the traditional roots will increase. And next, living healthy is a very good thing. It's a good investment on your own. Now, thanks to fitness apps or fitness trackers and all these things, I think there is a slow change in the people. At least the younger generation is a bit more aware about all these things. They are trying to get their calories in control. They are doing something about it. Now, in this particular article, he is talking, or he is putting most of the burden or pressure only on the state. That is where we have to bring in multi-dimensional approach. That means individual, you can do something about it. Civil society, NGOs can do something about it. Society as a whole can do something about it. Yes. Then we have to put the burden on the government. Government has to step in the right places to make more awareness generation, to promote such awareness, communication systems, empowering the primary healthcare centers. If government can do only these much things, the rest of the things have to taken care by the society. Things will still be fantastic. Right? Again, the movement is moving towards multi-grain. We are going back to the traditionals, right? Healthy diets, lifestyle has changed, apps have been invented, even games are there. Like if you are walking daily for certain amount of number of feet, you are incentivized. So there are a lot of technological help also is coming. At the same time, government has to construct infrastructure like walking, cycling, sports, parks. See, these are the fields where government has to invest. The rest is equally true. Yes, understood? Yes. Now, so I have a simple exercise for you. First thing is, you don't have. I was informed that you don't have a economic class today, right? So you won't be having economic class after this. This is the last class. Next thing is, you can take a small question. You can brainstorm it. You can think about it. Okay. We can discuss it about tomorrow as well. The question is, what do you understand by, or what do you understand by the term rule of law? What do you understand by the term rule of law? And why it's important in a democracy? What do you understand by the term rule of law, and why is it important for democracy? You can just take a A4 sheet, write on one side. You can draw diagrams. You can write in whatever language you want to, or you can write any example that you feel like. There is no limit, but just one side of the A4 sheet will be enough. So try to address it. I hope all of you have noted the question. Where
Yes, sir.
we have to submit. So you can send the PDF, or you can just save it. I mean, at least it will be an exercise to you, right? So if you want to send it to someone, I will update you. I will ask Mr. Chakri or Vijay sir to update you. Okay? At least it's an exercise for your own brain. What is rule of law according to you, and why it's important for democracy? Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions? From articles we have discussed today.
Yes, sir.
The rest of you? Afghan article, again, as I told you, Sumant, it's totally in my point. There is no value addition. Yes. One thing is very simple. Remember, there is a concept called as vaccine hesitancy. It's what is vaccine hesitancy? Vaccine hesitancy means people are not interested to take such vaccines because they have heard something, whether that vaccine will have side effects or it will kill them, something in that sense. Okay, according to World Health Organizations, it is one of the top 10 threats to the world. It is in the same league of climate change. Okay, just understand, just on par with climate change, vaccine hesitancy is also a very, very serious and severe issue. Okay, now why it's important is because if you see polio, okay, only in Afghanistan and Pakistan, polio virus is only in Afghanistan and Pakistan, polio virus is present. Okay, if India is allowing Afghanistan citizens, okay, polio is also coming into India, right? Not only that, there are multiple reasons. If you look at the demography or religion and other things, the most common things are religion, right? Fake news, poverty, and illiteracy. These are the four common themes that run whenever you find about vaccine hesitancy. If somebody is saying, you know, I don't need to take COVID vaccine, he must be either illiterate or he must have fallen to the victim of, he must be a victim of fake news. He might have PhD, but he's still a victim of fake news. So these are the four common things that will develop this vaccine hesitancy. There is a very good wise documentary in Pakistan. It shows there are certain people in Pakistan who says the polio vaccine is created by Israelis. Israelis are a enemy to the Islam. So that is why I don't want to take polio vaccine. That is the reason given by a certain Pakistani individual. Okay. And a few months ago or a few weeks ago, a group of women volunteers going for giving polio vaccine in Pakistan were escorted by a inspector. That particular inspector was killed by the these extremists. Why? They think that giving vaccine is a bad thing. Okay, so such is the Stone Age mindset that people still have in the 21st century. We cannot blame them at the same time because they have either they are victims to fake news, or they have read a lot about these religious doctrines, or they are poor and illiterate. So poor and illiterate people are more or less suggestible. That means we can modify their minds. We don't have to go to Pakistan and Afghanistan. Within our own country, probably in some of your own relatives or friends or someone, you might have seen someone with vaccine hesitancy. He's not taking COVID vaccine because he has seen somewhere in WhatsApp that he will die after 2 years of taking vaccine. Okay. So vaccine hesitancy is a very, very real threat to the country, and especially in relation to Afghanistan, that virus is traveling to India. That there is a high chance, and India has worked very hard to eliminate polio. See, that is the greatness of this country. 1.4 billion people, and every state has come together and eliminated polio. Just imagine the feat, size of achievement. 1.4 billion population, 0 polio cases in last 3 years. I have to salute all the ASHA workers. They go from home to home, house to house, asking each and everyone give the polio vaccines. So that's proactive governance. Very good thing. Bad thing is, because of this close proximity, both our neighbors Pakistan and Afghanistan still have polio vaccine. Okay. So again, Sumant, as I have mentioned, I don't find that article actually any value addition to you. If I find something, I will definitely discuss that. Okay, don't worry about Afghanistan. Few vaccines are, you are talking about India, right, Pranati? I mean, in the sense, failure of some sector which led to this situation. Yes, delay in vaccination cannot be a reason for vaccine hesitancy. Yes, there was some administrative mismatch, but that cannot be a reason for vaccine hesitancy. At least not in the COVID case, because none of us are safe till all of us are safe, right? Okay, so don't forget to at least try to understand that particular question, the rule of law question.